Welcome to Bond Nuts, where we'll be applying the Manzer or mostly Thurlow scale of quantitative analysis of pop culture narrative to a binary system.
This podcast contains spoilers, mature content, and language. Viewer discretion is advised.
Hello there, and welcome back to Lost Signals, TV and movie reviews, where we'll be discussing Darkest Hour, which is one of the Oscar nominations for this year. I, of course, remain Scott Thurlow, and I'm here tonight with Jonathan Ian Manzer.
And Churchill told me to say, jog on.
He did indeed. And Stephen Amosi.
How you doing?
All right, so for this movie, I believe we're going to toss it to Steve-O with the funny logline.
So, the funny logline we came up with for this one is, "Are you surprised by my tears, sir? Strong men also cry."
Indeed. And I wanted to add, Hitler is a bummer, dude. So I'm going to add it right there. But I will start off with the plot. So as you may have gathered and may have known about the circumstances of Darkest Hour, it's about Winston Churchill's rise or placement into Parliament as Prime Minister and his decisions and how he leads the country in the early days of World War II against Germany, against a German assault. And it also crosses over with, funnily enough, with Dunkirk, another Oscar movie. The events of that movie happened during the events of this one, more or less. So it's basically, again, like him. It starts off with his predecessor, Neville Chamberlain, getting basically voted out of the Prime Minister position and him trying to struggle and come to terms with how he's going to go forward with leading the country and sort of getting the general consensus of whether or not, one of the big things is whether or not he should negotiate a truce or a peace with the Third Reich, if you will, and his various advisors who are either for or against it, and just him, like, you know, again, like trying to come into the position of leading the country against in their darkest hour. So it's pretty much a character piece, and Gary Oldman plays Winston Churchill, of course. So I'm looking at a very strong 2, possibly a 3 score-wise. I think the film was paced pretty damn well. It's only about 2 hours, maybe just over 2 hours. I think that was the perfect length for it. I don't think there was like any parts where that were either too long or too short. I think every little vignette, if you will, as he went forward with his position, I think it all made sense. It all fit well together. So I think it was pretty damn solid. What do you guys think?
So, if you look at the structure of this film, very much like Hidden Figures from last year, it stays close to the formula of doing a biopic historical piece. You have the main character, they come to power, go through his trials and tribulations, he reaches his lowest point, then he gets inspired and wins the support of everyone around him, beats his nemesis, which is not Hitler in this case.
I mean, it is, but not really.
Yeah. And you also get the greatest hits album of Winston Churchill's speeches. So, yeah, I agree with the two because this is a good movie, but it's just a kind of very standard kind of.
It follows like a formula we've seen before,
yeah,
but
it
does
does
it
it well, but it's nothing I haven't seen before in that sense.
Sure.
So you're coming down around a 2 as well?
Probably a strong 2, yeah.
Okay.
You might convince me to do a 3, so go ahead.
I don't know. I was trying to decide what I was going to give this. There was no point in this movie where it felt like it dragged.
Mm-hmm.
There were points where it felt kind of like British propaganda. But I don't think that's necessarily going to affect this question.
Sure.
However, I thought that it was a strong film throughout. I was always interested in what was going on. The plot was enough to keep me invested pretty strongly throughout the movie. I think I'm going to end up going with a softer but a 3.
Well, definitely a 3.
It's there are just so many points where there's these little moments of levity that are like really interesting and funny, and like there's these little moments of just strong, like really intense tension that happen throughout the film as well.
and all structured perfectly to make you feel that way when its formula says to feel that way. They hit that emotional point when you need to feel a connection with the character. They build that tension music. They pepper it with his speeches so you're inspired. You come off really liking Winston Churchill. Again, no, I don't fault you for finding it engaging because I think that it was manufactured without, I don't want to say without creativity because this is it's well done, but it sticks very close to the formula.
An obvious formula. Like, I get that, and I sort of initially, Steve-O, I was going to maybe give it a soft 3, but full points, but I guess this is going to sound, again, I don't mean it to be this connotation, but I don't want to give this movie a perfect 10. So I'm going to have to take off points a little bit here and there, which I may take off points for other questions, but I also think that in order to avoid that, I'm going to give it a very strong 2, but not a perfect 3. Although I do agree that the plot was engaging throughout. It was never faltering, never switched in some way that made me disengage with it, or lost me or anything. So you know what I mean? It may be just me not wanting to give it a 10 or at least a 3 here.
Sure.
So I certainly see your side, and I was almost going to do it myself. I just think at the end of the day, I decided internally to take off a few minor points, adding up to a strong 2 for the plot. So
I don't see any of those arguments being, in my mind, against plot.
Sure.
Taking off points.
And I admit that. Yeah, of course. I definitely admit that.
I mean, both of your arguments I'm taking into account. I don't see. I see them being points against other things that I probably will take points, a couple or a point or two off for, but I don't see those being any. I don't see those taking off points for plot for me, and that's kind of where I'm going to come down on it. I think so. I think I am going to give it a 3. I'm going to stick with that.
You came super close to convincing me, but I'm still going to stick with a strong 2. But I see your rebuttal, and I get it. Yeah.
On the opposite side, I was not having my mind changed whatsoever. You could have given a Winston Churchill-like speech. And I still would have been, I would have been Halifax in this situation.
I'll save my Churchill speeches for when I can change your mind.
Alrighty. Well, that'll bring us to themes with you, E.
So, this is a very difficult one for me. Sure. And you kind of brought up the propaganda angle. I'm not going to go that far. Certainly wasn't Dunkirk in the British spirit overcomes everything type propaganda.
But it wasn't not that either in a sense. Yes. You know what I mean? Go on.
And what I found is I'm pretty anti-war in general. And the way they made Neville Chamberlain, who is a running joke in history anyway, as being this weak leader in the face of Nazism, and also Halifax, who they were almost painfully, not painfully necessarily, their incompetence and the fact that they were wrong was so present. And especially since we're doing a historical piece where we're looking back at it in hindsight. Yeah, Churchill won. If Dunkirk had gone differently, Churchill would have been the villain of this, and Halifax, and I don't think that they were given, it wasn't balanced well to the point of trying to engage that side, and maybe it shouldn't have been, but unless it came across that the peace movement was
somehow
considered foolish and weak versus the strong man of
who also cries,
yes, of Winston Churchill, and I don't like the implications of that because. And I guess, I don't know, though, it's tough for me because, you know what, I'm just going to pass it along. Right. That's my piece.
I'll try to build on that because I completely see where you're coming from that angle, but it's tough, as you said, because, this is how history shook down, right? So, yes, as you said, if it had gone differently, it would have been a different story, of course, but since it isn't that, that almost has to be in the film, by default, it's going to be, because that's what happened. So, I see what you're getting at, and I agree, it somewhat was stilted that they were very obviously the weaker characters, of course not rising up to the occasion, if you will, versus Churchill, who did or portrayed as such. So I see that that's a sticking point, a tricky little I don't know, quicksand.
Sticky wicket?
Yeah, kind of. But I think, I guess if you take that with a grain of salt, perhaps, like, knowing that that's going to be the case in this film, that I think, in that light, they did do a good job with that theme, even though, like I said, I agree to an extent that it was not quite balanced in the way it could have or perhaps should have been.
Then, can I just rebut that for a quick second? I don't necessarily think their intention was to portray these two as weak and subpar.
So it's the intention execution thing that we bring up a lot.
Yeah, so I think that, but that's an emergent property of this film. What is the theme then? That Winston Churchill's awesome?
So never sits in the British Empire. I mean, like, no, you're asking a serious question, and yeah, I guess it's like rally yourself around, like, not nationalism, I guess, but patriotism, like just the spirit of the people, if you will, like sort of, and as in sort of embodied by him in a sense. So like, that's how I'd answer, like, what is a theme? At least for me. So, given that, what do you think, Steve-O?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I guess the main theme of this has to be like, you know, Winston Churchill's indomitable spirit, and as representative of the indomitable spirit of the British people and the Allies in general,
it's kind of what
I guess, or whatever.
Yeah, right.
Even though actually that's not true, because the only thing you saw of anyone else other than Britain was them being fucking either like getting destroyed by Hitler or Franklin Roosevelt saying "fuck you" to Britain.
We'll bring your planes to near the border of Canada.
You can have a horse pull them across.
Yourself.
Yeah. But I guess that is the main theme, and I'm not sure I'm not sure it's a strong theme. I don't think that. I think this, and that's why I say like it's. That's why I mentioned propaganda in the beginning. Like, I really like this movie, but it does exactly what a propaganda movie is supposed to do. It makes me like it because I'm like inspired by it, right? Or like, you
buy into what it's selling you. Yeah.
I see Oldman as Churchill as this like, you know, inspiring character, and you know, on a side note, I see Gary Oldman as an inspiring actor for pulling off this role as well as he did. But like, yeah, I mean, I don't think I can give themes a 1 just for those reasons. It's a really good movie. I'm gonna recommend it at the end of this. I think that people should watch it, but be aware of what you're watching as you do. And I don't know. I guess that's pretty much it. I mean, there's great propaganda films from America from this era that are good movies, but they're propaganda. Like, know what you're watching when you're watching it.
Like, no, it's more of a, and it's ironic in a way that both these movies, that Dunkirk and Desire, came out in the same year, which I've never heard of Dunkirk prior to it, so I'm glad I know more now. But like, it seems like when people harken back to a time when I love British culture. I love British television. I love British comedy. And I get, I don't know, is this their kind of reflection back on, this was our moment in history where we showed what we're about. Yeah. And that's not necessarily what I consider being a Brit to be about. So I'm not going to give it a 0.
That's fair. You are going to give it a 0.
Yes.
Right. So like, yeah, I think you guys, I was somewhat on the fence about this one, and we had a quick precast discussion about this very topic because of the way, like, again, like the trickiest nature of it. But I think at the end of the day, I will come down on your guys' side. I guess I wanted to say something like, it depends on like how much you buy into it, as we were just saying, Steve-O, right? So like, the theme is obviously there, but it depends how much you agree with it, even though you know it's like, clearly that's going to be the case, as I said. But I think you're right, like, I'm going to give this one a default 0, a soft 0 perhaps. But I'm going to side on that side of the fence of the argument in this instance. So, all right. Well, that'll bring us to antagonist with you, Steve-O.
Hitler?
Yep. Sort of.
Hitler's an off-screen antagonist.
Exactly.
We'll say.
Off-screen villain.
You don't actually ever see Hitler other than in newspapers and stuff in this movie.
You also hear him quite a bit.
And yeah, you do hear his speeches. True. Like, obviously, the Nazis are...
Nazis are bad. You can agree.
I hesitate to say a good antagonist, but they are a hell of an antagonist.
You said this before. Whenever even an analogy to Nazis come up, they're going to be effective because they're fucking Nazis. It's a default villain because for a reason, right?
For the most part,
sure. So
so given that. I think that you're going to bring up another point, Ian, and I'll leave that to you. But yeah, I mean, hearing Hitler's speeches over radios and stuff throughout the movie is pretty effective of reminding you that he's around. And the film
there's a looming threat.
Does a really good job of reminding you of what's at stake.
Yeah.
Throughout and kind of ramping up the stakes of the movie as it goes. Of the war as it goes throughout the movie. So I mean that's what I'll say about Hitler. That's all I have to say about Hitler.
Case closed on Hitler.
So this is going to be even, I think, stranger than the one you did. Nazis are such a villain in our culture. And in a way, I felt that they made them fresh again in a certain sense with dealing with the uncertainty of, at the time, of what they were dealing with. Not only a victory, because that's kind of, it has to be in the war thing, but the people don't know what's going on. The politicians debating about how much information to spread, and referencing the speed, and you get occasional glimpse of the battlefield of bombs being dropped on there or what's left over from it. It was a different type of World War II combat that they're showing, which is just from the politicians' side of it. So I thought that was fairly. For something that I've seen 1,000 times before.
It felt fresh. Yeah.
Sorry. It felt fresh. But I'm going to bring up Halifax, or was it Vice Court?
Viscount.
Yeah. And to a certain extent, Neville Chamberlain, who are the Peace Party, who are trying to negotiate with Benito Mussolini and open up some futurist restaurants in Britain, which is a very deep pull there.
Jesus Christ! Yeah. If you get that, good on you.
But so they're the political opponents of Winston Churchill throughout this, and I don't know if they were necessarily portrayed accurately, but they were you felt the pull of the opposition.
Their side. Yeah.
So
I think I'm going to agree. Yes, of course, as we said, as a blanket antagonist, Nazis are always going to be effective because of the nature of being a Nazi, of the movement. Mm-hmm. But in the terms of plot of this film, yes, his sort of political rivals, and not even rivals because they're technically part of his party, just that they disagreed with what he was what his policies were during the wartime. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I think they were portrayed pretty well. Both actors did a good job, and even there was some other dissent within the ranks, but they certainly were the faces of the mindset of trying to negotiate a peace a treaty with the encroaching threat, which, as you said, they were very uncertain about. They couldn't predict what was going to happen, so they felt the only way to survive is to broker a peace with this seemingly overwhelmingly unstoppable force. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I think they did a good job, and I agree with you. Whether or not it's how 100% historically accurate is, certainly I imagine they took a little bit of liberty, but certainly they took facts from actual history. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to side with you. I think they were pretty solid. Certainly Winston, Oldman as Winston felt antagonized by trying to convince them that we need to fight them on the hills and in the streets and so forth. So yeah, I think I'm going to give them a solid 1 at the end of the day.
Yeah, I would agree. I think I liked that angle. I didn't want to mention it because I wanted to leave it to you to mention, but I did like that angle, and I think that they do. They provide doubt to him, yes. Whereas Hitler provides a surety to him, right? Hitler's presence is him saying, "I will never back down," whereas Halifax and Chamberlain, to a certain extent, provide doubt.
Maybe we should
to his cause,
somehow, capitulate,
and perhaps they're even bigger, at least personally, antagonists to him.
Yeah.
So I'm going to give antagonists a pretty strong one.
All right. Well, that'll bring me to protagonist, Winston Churchill, as portrayed by Gary Oldman, and I think did an incredible job. There's a reason why he's up for Best Actor, and this is also in the Best Film noms, as I mentioned. Yeah, Gary Oldman is one of the best character actors ever, alive. Mm-hmm. So I think we said something like during the film, like, damn, he definitely transformed himself into Churchill. And I think he was super convincing. Like, I think Steve-O, I'm going to steal this from you, sorry, but you're like, I sometimes see Gary Oldman and sometimes I see Winston Churchill.
Yeah.
I think that may be the best thing to say about it. You know, I bought in, like, he was perfectly rounded in all ways. He embodied all, at least as I know, characteristics of the actual man himself. And I think it was very engaging, as you said, to follow his journey during this part of his life, during like possibly the most famous part of his life, indeed.
Yeah.
So yeah, like I don't know much more to say. I'm gonna give him the strongest of all ones because of that fact. I think that was great casting, and he fucking killed it. So
I think that he was more Churchill than Oldman during the film, like
Sure.
during this movie. Like he you know, there's a lot of roles
he like Sergeant Osiris
that you see an actor that you know, and you're like, oh, it's whatever. That's Keanu Reeves or whatever. You know, like
it's Harrison Ford being whoever.
Yeah, exactly. There are. It's rare that somebody gets this into character for a role, and like you see it, you know, from Daniel Day-Lewis and Gary Oldman,
Who, by the way, he's competing against, of course, in this series.
obviously. And I think he's finally going to beat that bastard. But yeah, I think that you watch this movie and you see Churchill more than you see Oldman.
Yeah.
At least to me, like that's what I got out of it.
I have a question for you guys.
Okay.
Because I had long said that I can watch an entire movie with Gary Oldman in it and not realize he was in the movie. If you didn't know beforehand,
I would never have
good
known.
one.
Yeah.
I don't think
a
I would
chance.
either. Yeah.
Yeah, and
I think that may be
yeah, that's all I have
the
to say
best
about
evidence.
that.
Yeah. Fucking A. Good call.
There are. Here's the thing: in most movies, if I wasn't thinking about it and I didn't know it was Gary Oldman, I wouldn't realize it was him. This, I would not have a chance of realizing it unless I already knew it was him.
Yeah, maybe there's a bit of style, like the makeup, like his costume, if you will.
But
Yeah.
Looks
his
great.
mannerisms.
But even beyond that, just him acting as that role sold it. Like, you're right. Good question. I do like that. I'm not sure if indeed I didn't notice him.
I wouldn't have noticed him.
Yeah.
Well, I think we're all giving it a strong one in that case.
Yeah.
And it's going to bring us to secondary/supporting with you, E.
Oh, well, for the most part, this was solidly acted. King George
He was kind of stand out.
and I think this goes to the British propaganda a little bit too.
Sure.
They really did show like how important a royalty can be in
In politics.
bringing like a kind of a steady hand. Once he decides to support Churchill, that's when Churchill
Gave him more
begins to
confidence,
when Churchill begins to take on who he in history became.
Mhm.
Ali plays the mentor role
In a
type thing.
sense, yeah.
Like, and then his wife. Like again, the problem is Gary Oldman's stealing the scenes, every scene he's in. So everyone has to play against that, and it kind of
It overshadows
detracts
it a bit, yeah.
from the performances. But I think overall, it was pretty well done, and I think that the British people, especially when he's engaging them towards the end, really gave a sense of time and place and the mood of the people at that point. And so I'm going to give it a 1.
All very good points. I would say this: I don't think that he, when he's in a scene with another person, detracted from those other people. I think that like
Perhaps I chose my words poorly.
I think
I see
that
what you mean, though.
I think that Gary Oldman's an actor, and like another like one of those rare actors where like I think that people start to like act up
to play up to
beyond
his
what they are,
abilities.
and like you, or at least you feel that they are like acting up past what they're
He elevates others.
yeah, sure.
But
He's the Michael Jordan of acting.
But and then let me rephrase what I said.
Sure.
The thing is, Gary Oldman is playing a personality like Winston Churchill.
He obviously does.
Yeah, he's playing a larger life character in a sense, so
that's
therefore
what
everyone
it
has to
is.
play off of that, is what you're
Sorry.
saying. Yeah. So go on, Steve. I'm sorry.
No, I mean, I agree. You basically named all of the supporting characters that I had, except
I've got
for
one more.
Well, all right. Well,
Go on.
I'll leave the one more to you.
Okay.
But as you said, like his wife, King George, and I think I know which one you're gonna say now.
Yeah.
But very good performances. Obviously, your eye is on Oldman the entire time as Churchill, but all very good performances. I'm going to give it a fairly strong one.
Yeah, I mean, it's sort of inescapable because he's playing who he's playing, and he is the actor he is. But yeah, I want to mention Mrs. Layton, which was his typist, who was introduced quite early, and she's like
a small. I believe it's Miss Layton. I don't think she's married.
You're right. Miss Layton. She's a younger woman, unmarried and so forth. Her brother's in the war as well, but she's his typist. So as he as he tries to parse out the speeches, she's making notations of it, and she actually sort of helps him a bit here and there. Like, she doesn't have a big role, but I think the screen time she did have, she made the most of it. I guess I'll say. And she did a good job with it. And yeah, I agree with you guys, of course. King George was very well done, as was his wife. And I guess like his other like secondary, like the war council with him, the parliament members and so forth. Like, they were all fine. And yeah, collectively, I think they did a damn good job. I do like the point about the British people, like, the man on the street, if you will. I think that sort of counts collectively, and I think it all adds up to a very solid, strong one.
I agree with the point about the British people. I wish they had shown a little bit more of the British people.
Yeah, I could have gone for another scene or two with it, but
because this movie is like the exact opposite of Dunkirk, where you see like the ruling party.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's basically all you see in this movie. Whereas in Dunkirk, you saw all the soldiers on the ground.
It's a good double feature.
So
I think, as we said during the film,
in fact, they should just splice them together.
Yeah, that's a joke we made, but still. Go on, Steve.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's basically all I had to say.
Okay.
I had 2 points. I don't know if I remember both points on that, but on Miss
Layton.
One, she plays the audience avatar, and she gets to ask questions about things that haven't explained to her, so it doesn't feel like Winston Churchill's asking a question about something he should know information about. And I also think that to the point where you mentioned she helps him out, and the final speech to Parliament, he keeps looking up at her.
That's a good point.
I think that was a good touch to show how much he came to, not necessarily to rely on her support.
They had a good relationship.
I've come to rely on you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, you're right. And I agree with that. All right. So it's ones all around for secondary. And I was going to bring us on to dialogue. That's you, Steve-O.
If there was any part of this movie that was going to even come close to rivaling protagonists and Oldman's portrayal of Churchill, it would be the dialogue.
Absolutely.
The dialogue in this movie is wonderful throughout. It's all jovial, British,
Keep calm and carry on, dude.
Exactly. Until it's not. Until it's intense. Until it's fucking like... And... I almost want to. I'm gonna refrain from like talking about this too much right now because I'm gonna talk about it in the next question. But like the music that is overplaying most of this movie is so well done, and I don't know if you guys were picking up on this.
I did.
But every time that there was one of those really tense scenes where I could feel myself like leaning forward in my chair, there was no music. It was dead silence in the background, and like, the music would pick up again when he's like bantering and whatnot. But,
right.
Yeah, it's the dialogue is incredible, and that's all I have to say. I mean, it's gonna. I think it's gonna be a fairly quotable movie in the end, and like, it's just a well done flick, dialogue wise.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I don't have much more to add, but yeah. It's one of the strongest points, if not like tied with maybe like two other things in the film. That it's based on like actual speeches, of course, which were very rousing, like the famous ones. But even beyond that, even like the I guess behind doors, we don't know what really was said, but what was said in the movie was very very believable, but also like, I don't want to say snappy, but that's a word that comes to mind. You know what I
think
mean?
you could say snappy.
Winston Churchill was known historically as a wit.
For his wit, yeah.
And
exactly.
It was portrayed very well in here.
Yes. Well said.
They almost weaponized Winston Churchill's language here. It's like, again, all his they pace out the speeches really well.
Exactly.
In this,
good point. Yeah.
I was delighted every time I listened. It was one of the great orators of history, and they do it justice. And I think a lot of that has to do with Gary Oldman. And I wonder how much of it, like, if any of it was recordings spliced in with dialogue, as I mentioned in it, I don't know. Like, here's the thing: is I can't tell the difference between Winston Churchill giving this speech and Gary Oldman giving this speech. We discussed that after the film. Like, if we were like, we asked each other, did it seem to you as if they were splicing in the actual the actual radio, like his speech? I was like, I don't think so, but I'm not sure if I would have noticed it even if they did, if that is the case. So yeah, I think that's the best evidence that to say like give dialogue a very strong one, which I think we all are. Mm-hmm. All right, nice, and that'll bring me. I think you just alluded to the Steve-O, to style. I think style is also somewhat tied hand in hand with it because the shots, the cinematography, first and foremost, was top notch. It was incredible, and I noticed it like almost within the first 10 minutes of the film, and it never let up. And one of the cool things I thought was there was some nice wide tracking shots and so forth, which I think Joel, the director, his last name is escaping me. He's somewhat it's sort of like his trademark sort of style as a director, but also they didn't do it too much. But I think maybe 3-4 times it happened where there'd be a person a man on the street on the ground or a soldier on the ground, and as Churchill's deciding things or writing a speech, you see a panning shot from above, like a bird's eye view shot that gets wider and wider and wider, and that was cool. I thought that was very nicely interspersed throughout the film. Again, like I said, not overused, but when it was used, I enjoyed it. And just overall, and I'll leave soundtrack to you, Steve-O, even though you just mentioned it, but I agree, it was perfectly married to the shots that were happening and to the actions, mostly conversations, of course, but nevertheless, I think they all made sense. Steve was dropping shit. But yeah, I mean, I don't have much more to add about style, just that it was fucking perfectly solid, and it all added to the sort of feel and experience of the film.
Mm. Joe Wright was his name, by the way.
Yeah.
As the director's name.
Thanks.
I think you're absolutely right. The cinematography is mind-blowing in this movie. Or, actually, no.
Mind-blowing.
It's pretty goddamn good.
It's fucking top-notch.
There's one scene where Churchill walks from one room into another room. The entire color scheme changes as you pan past the wall, and then he walks out of a door. And the framing, the pan, the track across between rooms, it's all that scene will stick in my mind as this incredible shot. And that happens a lot throughout this movie. That I noticed. Oh, damn, that's a really cool, interesting way to shoot this scene. I have more, but you look like you were about to say something. Yeah.
Well, since we're talking about scenes, and I'll just do 2 examples of what I liked about the playing of darkness and light that they have. So there's one where
the lighting, good call.
Where he's going up in an elevator thing, and it's just him in the light and the darkness surrounding him. There's another one where you feel like is this at the point when he's really starting to stress about his decisions in the war, and you think it's nighttime. He has all
I think it's 2 in the morning, 3 in the morning, or something.
And then someone just opens up a window and it's bright light outside, and that really took me surprised. I'm like, you got me, movie. You tricked me there, and I appreciate that.
Yeah. I actually have 2 other scenes that I want to mention. One is when you first meet Churchill. It's in a completely dark room. Can't see a thing.
Miss Layton
walks in. Miss Layton walks in, and you see nothing in the corner of the room until you see a match struck, and you see him light his cigar with it, and then it kind of it brightens on him.
Yep.
And the other one is there's a point where he's talking to, I believe it's Halifax, and he's basically saying, it's the scene where he's saying, if you don't
go for peace,
if you don't look for peace, I'm going to resign within 24 hours. And his face is half shadow.
I noticed that too. Yeah,
perfectly
dude.
Lit. It's a great shot. So I mean, that's all over the place in there. The score of this movie is awesome. It's just really well done. I'm the one that always talks about music, although I don't know enough about music to get into the specifics of why it's awesome. But it's
more than us.
It plays with the score plays with your emotions really well, and that I take that as a job really well done. And something else that was alluded to earlier, the for lack of a better term, like the kind of old-timey sound filters that they put on characters whenever you're listening to somebody through an audio device is really just a nice little touch.
It's authentic.
And it reminds you of where you are. It places you in history. So yeah, style for this is getting a very strong one as well. I really like what Joe Wright and the team did with this.
Yep, agreed. All right, so that's going to bring us to recommendation. Do in fact recommend Darkest Hour E?
All right, so I'm just going to give it. This actually goes to style for one moment. Okay. Is that this? And as I mentioned this before, this is a really well done, formulaic historical biopic movie. And there's certain things that elevate it above mediocre. The thing is, if you like these type of movies, this is really well done. If you like historical things, if you like the idea of Winston Churchill and like the power of his speeches, you'll like this. There are, I would say a lot, or even like a large majority. There are groups of people that will not like this movie at all. But the people I hang out with, like 30-year-old guys, will appreciate this movie quite a bit, especially if they have an interest in history. So yeah, I give my recommendation, though I wouldn't recommend it to everyone.
Yeah, I think I agree with that. I will give it a recommendation with the caveat that I mentioned at the beginning of the podcast. Know what you're watching when you get into it. It's not like
I mean, that's true of any movie, but sure.
Watch this movie. Yeah, it is, but more so with a historical film, right? Watch this movie and then go and look up the history if you're actually interested in it. Like, go and do your own research on it, on what happened with Churchill. After I watched Dunkirk, I looked a little bit into what happened there, and now I know more about that than I did, or even than I would have if I had just watched the movie. Same thing with this, read about Churchill. There's a bunch of reading material
there are
about
many
Winston
things
Churchill,
about Churchill,
if you'd like to know more. I do strongly recommend this. It's a good starting point for anybody that wants to know anything about Churchill, and especially, obviously, this point in his life. And, it's a good movie. It's just a fun watch. It's 2 hours, but it doesn't really feel like 2 hours, and yeah, that's it.
Yeah, I mean, I have somewhat of a bias. It plays into my British heritage in a sense, although we alluded to the British propaganda thing. But as you guys just said, it's very well structured, even though it may be a familiar structure, but that doesn't mean they're using it badly. In fact, I think they're, like you said, you said, making it feel a bit fresh, and I think that's true. I think it's very, like I said, there's not a wasted second in this film. And it is interesting to get, if you don't know anything or much about the actual events of Churchill during the time of World War II, then perhaps you'll learn something, and perhaps that will spur you to learn more. But nevertheless, it is a very, very well done, more than competently put together film, and especially acted by Oldman and his supporting cast, as we said. So yeah, I would give it a pretty strong recommendation. I'd say Darkest Hour, check it out. I'm not sure if it'll win or should win, but I think it definitely deserves to be in the nomination at this point.
I think he should win.
Yeah.
Yes.
I think he should win for Best Actor for sure. And, catch our Oscar recap when we do that one. It's coming out in a couple weeks. But in terms of Darkest Hour, I would definitely highly recommend it to almost anybody, even though, yes, the group we hang out with is what you said. So certainly I think that demographic would enjoy it for sure. So I think that's the final scores in. I have given it, actually Steve-O gave it the highest score with a 9. And you and I gave it 8s, which comes out to something
8.3.
8.3. Yep. Which I think is damn solid. It's very strong film. It deserves to be seen. And like I said, I think I'm not disappointed that it's in the noms at all. So I think that'll do it. Any final thoughts on Darkest Hour? Nazis can suck it.
Yeah, go ahead,
and
Nazis.
And the sun never sets in the British Empire. So this has been Lost Signals TV movie reviews. Thanks for joining us. I've been Scott Thurlow. I've been here with Jonathan Ian Manzer.
When you podcast alone, you podcast with Hitler.
I don't know if Stephen or Moses are going to top that.
No, goodbye.
All right. See you next time. Have a good one.
Editing and engineering by Stephen Ramosi. Music by Christopher Morgan. Check us out on YouTube and iTunes for the shows, and on Facebook and Twitter for updates.